everybody. Hello, attendees. Thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome to the latest SaaS Ecosystem Alliance panel in conjunction with Digital Bridge Partners. My name is Cristina Flaschen. I'm the CEO of Pandium and a co-founder of the SaaS Ecosystem Alliance. And today we've got a great group of experts together to share their wisdom about adopting an ecosystem mindset within product organizations. So this panel is scheduled to run until 3:10 Eastern. We have some great questions already submitted, but we'll also leave 10 minutes at the end for audience questions. So if you have any, you can use the little Q&A function there down at the bottom at any time during this conversation, and we'll get through as many as we can. So now, without further ado, let's do some intros. So who are you, where do you work, and what do you do? And we'll start with Andy.
Okay, great. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. Andy Lauta. I'm a partner with Digital Bridge Partners. You may have heard of or know my partner, Alan Adler, who spends a lot of time on social media and talking about our go-to ecosystem framework. And I'll talk a little bit about this through the course of the conversation today. But the reason I was chosen to join in this panel is because I actually have a deep background in product, both product management, product marketing, and business development around that. And I've always taken, long before I started consulting when I was working for big software companies, a very ecosystem-centric approach to defining products and defining go-to-market strategies. So great to meet you all.
Thanks for joining. Justin, you want to go?
Yeah, thanks. So, hey, everyone. Justin Wells. I lead our ecosystem strategy here at Duda. So we are a web design platform for agencies. So when we look at an ecosystem standpoint, it's what can complement our platform in a deeply integrated and enriched manner. So, I'm looking at partners that can come in and solve those very specific use cases. I've had a background similar to Andy, both on the product side, but also building relationships. How can I facilitate a conversation between a business and their go-to-market strategies and a variety of other players in the market that can really execute on what needs to be done. Located here in Boulder, Colorado, right outside of Boulder, and we have offices all around the globe.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thanks for being here. Larry, you want to go?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Larry McDonough. I'm the director of product for our ecosystems at Procore. And if you haven't heard of Procore, we're a construction management SaaS platform. We've been around 20 years. And we are transforming the construction industry by helping them, manage the complexity of construction projects, making sure the right materials and the right people and the right equipment and, all get to the right place at the right time. And there's a lot of money to be saved by doing that right and doing it well. I have been in product management for, probably close to 30 years now. And before that, I was in development for probably like 20 years. No, it can't be that. I'm not that old. Maybe 15 years. Been around a long time doing product management and engineering management in platform companies. And just love the whole ecosystem space, partnerships, developers, and look forward to chatting today.
Excellent. And last but not least, Will.
Thanks, Cristina. Hey, everyone. My name is Will Clifford. I'm the Director of Product Integrations at LeafLink. I'm based in New York, and the company's headquartered in New York. LeafLink is a cannabis wholesale marketplace. And so we power sellers and buyers in the cannabis industry, helping them form relationships, get orders and that information and actual product from the seller to the buyer. And we do that in a lot of cases through integrations with different technologies, through building that marketplace and empowering our customers to do so. My experience has been in product. I'm currently in product today, but I also have experience in tech consulting, professional services, all kind of to do with integrations, ERP systems, those back-end business systems that power a lot of these companies. So excited to be here and share some of my experience as well.
Awesome. Cool. We have a great group of experience here. So let's go ahead and get started. So very first question, why is it important for SaaS companies to treat building an integration ecosystem as a strategic priority?
So do you want, do we get to go in order or?
Just jump in, just jump in.
I'll go ahead.
disagree.
I'll go ahead and get started. I mean, like I said, we've at DigitalBridge developed this code ecosystem framework, and really at that level, the framework encompasses all players in the ecosystem. It's not just other ISVs that are providing products that need to be integrated, but SIs, resellers, et cetera. But specific to product, that's really the starting point. And the reason it's so important more than anything else is because the industry is crowded, competition is fierce, it's hard to rise above the noise. It's really hard to establish relevance, especially for smaller companies. And once they do close business, retaining customers, it's so easy to switch these days that customer retention is huge. All of this stuff is very expensive. And so it's been proven that, we've got lots of research that shows it's been proven that the companies that do ecosystems better and, have better product ecosystem strategies are those companies that are more successful. They sell faster, they grow faster, they have greater lifetime value, customer activation, retention, all the rest. So,
Yeah, I kind of like that. And it's similar for how we treat it here at Duda. We as a web design platform, we have the luxury of catering to agencies when they're building websites for clients on behalf of their clients. And the way we look at our ecosystem is a very curated experience. So, it's selective of who we bring in to solve those very unique use cases. But at the end of the day, the agencies rely on Duda to offer them the best solution. So if we're not treating it as a strategic priority and I use the words integrate and forget, and we just kind of like, oh, here's our app store. Regardless if whoever's building the app integration, and we iframe a lot of our app integrations, and we have a very robust API framework, but if that experience is broken in any point of that user's journey, they look at Duda, regardless if it's the actual partner that we've brought in. So we really treat it as that is almost on an equal playing field as a product strategy, because we want the agencies to feel confident that we're offering an ecosystem that has that rich experience.
Yeah, I think specifically in the industry of cannabis, there's a lot of, and like any flourishing industry, there's a lot of companies that pop up. They offer very specific offerings. Maybe it's a CRM, point of sale, ERP. And our customers are then kind of, all this technology is thrown at them. They have to then figure out who's going to own this, who's going to actually enter this data. And as a centralized marketplace, if we can step in and say, we're the solution for you, and we can talk to these other companies that you're working with and help you remove that double data entry, that's really what's going to set us apart and help to gain customers and definitely keep them within the ecosystem. Because once you establish that connection, it's much easier or a little bit more difficult for them to hop between systems, but they're also gaining a lot of benefit from being on your platform. Mm-hmm. And then I also just want to say that if you think that you're going to be the only system that's going to solve all of the business's problems, then that's definitely not the right mindset. You know that you've got your bread and butter that you do really well. You want to find the right partners that do other things really well, so you can both work together and at the end of the day, make a better experience for your joint customer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with everything everyone said. I would add that kind of from a technical perspective, over time, what I've seen, especially this is really true with SaaS, but our tech stacks are getting more and more complex, and customers are expecting all these different pieces of software that they're using to work together. And SaaS by nature, everything, data is all over the place. They're in different. Each SaaS platform is trying to suck in as much data as they can and get. So from a customer perspective, if you look at it the other way around, they really need this stuff to work together. So that's one kind of reason why I think it's really important. If you focus as a company on your stack alone and just the set of partners you have, and not really on the larger problem that they're trying to solve, then you're going to miss out on additional routes to market. So that ecosystem is really powerful and needs to be part of your strategic arsenal.
Yeah, I totally agree with what everyone said. And Will, especially your point about building every feature that everyone asks for. I think that's been a really interesting evolution of tech. I started working in tech like over 15 years ago. And I think the impulse then was, if a customer asks for it, just build it, even if it's not your core competency. But I really love the transition into highly specialized pieces of software that do like a handful of things really well and operate in that sort of composable stack that works best for their specific needs. And just for the folks that may have joined after we started here, if you guys have questions that you'd like the panel to address, you can use the little Q&A function in Zoom, and we'll save some time at the end. So another question, this is a good one. What are some internal and external roadblocks that may result in product orgs being hesitant to adopt an ecosystem mindset? And what advice would you give to someone who is trying to get their product org to commit to building integrations?
It's on the roadmap. Right. It's, you know, when we're looking at an ecosystem living alongside product, there could be very well be features on your roadmap that are like, you know, we all know product ideations, and it could be on your roadmap two years out in your backlog. And a lot of times, you know, there will be an integration where it solves exactly what that feature release is going to be. And products, sometimes they want to hold on to the space, that way that feature comes, and it's a very native and core experience of the platform. But a lot of times customers want things now. You know, they may be looking at an ERP solution that they want to use alongside their website, and we can't say, hey, it's going to be 2 years. And I always use this in terms of, you know, not necessarily a sense of an argument, but the other side of the coin is, well, why don't we execute on this integration and find learnings from this? How are they using the product? What features of that product do they actively use? And it almost gives you a litmus test to the features that's on your roadmap. So that way you can have a better insight of what you're going to build to and learn and ideate on that. And there's no reason to say we're going to integrate now and then have both live in a symbiotic relationship. But I always push back against the it's on our roadmap kind of mentality of let's give it a chance, let's learn from it, and then we can also release our own product in a native experience later.
Yeah, I want to add one thing. I think that product teams, if product management's done really well, you should be identifying within your own organization what things you want to be as part, like Cristina said, your core competence, right? What are you going to deliver? And what are you, by saying that, you're also saying what you're not going to deliver, right? And when you say you're not going to deliver something, if you know it's something customers need, then you should enable it somehow, right? Otherwise, you're just being irresponsible to your customers and you're leaving money on the table, right? So I think what product organizations need to do, and good ones do this, is they identify what they're not going to do, but they enable others to do it well for their customer, right? And sometimes that means, you know, building or extending the APIs in such a way that you're building APIs to enable that partner integration to take where you stopped to the next level. And I think that's a place that product teams often fail. And you know, I'm a product person, so I've seen us do that too, right? It's you want to focus on your deliverables and what you got to do, and this other thing is, you know, like I don't know who it was, Justin said, it's, you know, it's in the roadmap, it's on the backlog. But you got to be really careful and be mindful and leave space for those things.
Yeah, I would agree with what people are saying. I mean, I think the biggest challenge is resources, right? It's like, you know, as you enter markets, you're going to get a diverse set of customers that likely have diverse needs and you know, can quickly get sucked into the morass of all the different integrations that, you know, individual customers want. And so really understanding, you know, how you're going to balance your resources against that, you know, and figuring out how to prioritize, you know, what integrations are most important. And not only that, but I would say also to prioritize, I think Larry was saying, you know, referring to this as well, which is, what are you going to do? In other words, what are the top critical strategic integrations that you need your product team to take ownership of? And then what are the integrations that you can let go of and let your ecosystem build for you, you know, whether it's a solution provider or get other ISVs to build an integration. And really that's, I think, the trickiest piece. But, you know, the original thing is just like, you know, engineers tend to want to own everything, right? And so getting them, I think like Larry and Justin, I think both said, it's like getting them to understand what's our core value, where are we really adding value? Let's focus on that. And the integrations that enable that most directly, and then, you know, outsource or work with partners on the other stuff. So
let me just add one thing and jump in again. Sorry. Yeah. The second part of this was around metrics, right? And I think the strongest metric is, at least from my experience, really is retention rate, right? So as an argument back to your product team, if you can show significant higher retention for customers that are leveraging your integrations, and I think if everyone looks, you're going to find that, then that's a really powerful metric. Business listens to retention rate.
Yeah, we'll go ahead. I saw you in.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything. Again, I think that'll just be understood going forward, so I don't have to say it every time. But I think another point to add around retention would be if you're doing what you set out to do as a business, which is helping companies achieve their goals and grow and develop, which is happening a lot in cannabis. There's consolidation happening. There's multi-state operators popping up that don't just work in one small market, but as these companies grow, they're going to continue to look for efficiencies because they're going to continue to inherit new technology and so on. And they may even start to get to the point where they have their own tech team. So the other thing to consider is, yes, you want to get your key integrations that you want to own, but you also want that really solid and extensive base layer of APIs that you've got documentation for, it's accurate, it extends to all the capabilities you want to enable via API, because when you're placing 10 orders a week, that then you jump to placing 1,000, you're not going to, you're going to want to automate a lot of that through APIs. And if you're not ready with the connectivity on your end, that's where you could start to encounter churn risks from these customers.
Yeah, really good point.
I think it's interesting too. I think Larry mentioned, or maybe it was Andy, that engineers want to build things, and I think product managers come in different flavors, from like, we're going to build literally everything in house, to being really pragmatic and just trying to like bolt things together. And this ecosystem play, I think, is somewhere in the middle. But again, I think that harkens back to that trend of not being everything for everybody and using the best in breed tools to help assist with your customers' needs. Cool. So let's look at another here. What are some of the best practices for ensuring that an organization's product roadmap is in tune with its integration ecosystem roadmap? And what are some common missteps that you've seen in sort of that exercise?
I think as the product team starts to build out features, a question should always be, and really it's maybe a list of questions: how is this going to be used by our customers, by our biggest customer, by our smallest customer, who adds the most value, the emerging growth markets? Because there may be a different story between the two, and you want to, when you take something to market, maybe the first version of it is just within the UI and in your platform, but you quickly need to have that integration capability as well, because that is oftentimes missed, where you built out this amazing platform, it's great, it's got all the bells and whistles, but if you can't communicate it with it digitally or through an API, then you're going to run into those requests that come up from strategic customers of, why can't I automate this, and so on. So I think that's definitely a gap that starts to happen, especially in earlier stage companies.
You stole my answer, Will.
Yeah, what I would say from my experience, one of the key best practices that I found is what we tend to call solutioning. But let me define that a little bit. By solution, what I mean, a solution equals a combination of a specific customer or customer segment and a use case, right? And identifying what are the customer segments that are, or how do you segment your customer base? And like in the case of cannabis, you're probably segmenting by state, because the legal implications of selling cannabis in each state is different. So that's a very important factor that's going to impact your ecosystem in a big way, potentially, so segmenting the customers, and then also segmenting the use cases, because depending on, as your solution or platform expands, you're going to be enabling multiple use cases, but different use cases are going to bring into play different products that you need to integrate with. And so, really having that understanding of what are the solutions, i.e. customer segments and use cases that are our highest priority, and you're probably, at least for smaller companies, maybe 1 to 3, you're going to be able to do yourselves. And then beyond that, prioritize and then, work with your ecosystem to solve the integration problems beyond that. Like Will said, given that, you guys have a robust API and developer support and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, what I've seen work really well as well, besides a lot of these things, is just put yourself in the seat next to the product team. Really run the ecosystem roadmap similar to the product roadmap. The more I can be ingrained in what I know is coming out, the feedback that the product team is getting, things that our development team wants to build. If I line up our roadmaps and almost create like one roadmap, it allows me to both know what's coming on the product standpoint. I can look and find things in the market where the product team might not be looking for. And we're able to then prioritize those together and say, okay, we know this feature is being requested. It's gonna require this much development or these many resources, and maybe it fits our highest strategic partner, but it doesn't have a solution. Going back to Andy's comment, there is doesn't have a solution for that longer tail. Is maybe we launch a feature and we launch an integration at the same point and message those differently and provide a solution at the end of the day to the customer. But the more I can be ingrained in what our product team is doing and the more they know what I'm looking at in terms of an ecosystem strategy, I think the better the outcome is going to be overall.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of things where places where things can go wrong, I think that was the second part of your question, Cristina. I would say, and I alluded to this a little bit, one of my earlier answers is product teams can often, I've seen, build things, build features and functions in your platform, your SaaS platform, or your product, and then create, or maybe even if they did the APIs first, great, they release APIs for third-party use. But a lot of times they can think of the API as a separate product with different use cases by the user. And I think that's a common place to stumble, right? Because then what you end up doing is you'll end up releasing some APIs that enable a third party to basically build what you just built. But that's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to build something, kind of like that, but extends it, right? So being able, a real common mistake on the API side is to, you might be building something that a user is creating a form or something and entering, right? But a third party is going to maybe want to do something robotically and maybe have 1,000 users, right? So therefore your API has to be able to handle not just, submitting one at a time, but maybe doing batch processing of stuff, right? And if you don't think of the API as a product manager, thinking about a separate product, different use cases, then you're going to stumble there.
My God, Larry, you're speaking my language. I mean, we work with APIs, partner systems all day, every day. And I was going to say exactly what you said, which is to think about the scalability in the beginning and implement as best you can the best practices for API design early on. I mean, there's so many companies that are really large now and robust and had some sort of solution that they kind of hacked together and they were going to rebuild it someday. And now it's, a core part of their product that functions dramatically differently from an API perspective from the rest of it. So I always like to say, think about the ultimate goal of this being really successful and try to build your infrastructure towards that. But yeah, great chat. I always get excited talking about APIs. Cool. Next question, and then we'll take one from the audience. So one thing that we've noticed anecdotally over the last couple of years is that SaaS buyers are becoming a lot more savvy when it comes to integrations, and they're not just concerned about the integration existing, but also the depth of the functionality. Is that something that you guys have run into? And do you think that companies should focus more on the breadth of integration or the depth of integration?
I never see, to me, it's never an either or, it's always an and. There are multiple aspects where I'm like, we should get some breadth there, but going back to the very first question is you need that depth there. And the way we look at it is we have conversations with our product managers and our development teams to say, let's not look at these integrations as one-off integration. Let's build a repeatable process. That way, when we look at this holistically, and it kind of goes back to Larry's last point about, developing APIs from a product standpoint, your team and your product management and the company overall can devote more efficiencies to scale and allow for integrations to have that depth because we've built it from the foundation and we inherently have breadth in that. And then we can focus on each integration on a business standpoint, on an iterable standpoint to get that depth over time. I think that allows teams to really, looking at it on a multitude and thousands rather than an individual basis. Maybe that's relying on parties like Zapier to solve some of those simpler use cases, or even bringing in third parties. Let's say our development resources are tight. How can we also bring in third parties to do some of that development as well, where they have experiences that can, again, give us that depth that we might necessarily have.
Yeah, I don't know. I would guess I'll just jump in since to fill the silence that I agree. I don't think it's an either or, but for sure, for those critical integrations that you need to make sure that they do everything the customer needs to do. So I think, depth of the top, priority strategic integrations needs to be a priority. But and again, it comes down to resources. How much resource do you have to apply both on internal developments as well as supporting your APIs and external developers.
And priorities, right? Breadth is really about focus. You can't, span every possible surface that you could imagine, right? So you have to focus where you want to invest. I think that's the key. So I would call it sort of focus and then depth. And then, you expand as time moves on.
Yeah, the other point I would add is just when you're, and I think it's definitely an but when you're exploring there's a request for some kind of new functionality added to an integration, I think treating it again like any other product, the integration is going to be key there. You really want to get, if it's screen sharing virtually with customers to understand what they're actually doing day to day, just like you would on any kind of like UX UI update. Think about that from the integration perspective, because you can also step in and say, I notice you're doing these 3 things. If we adjusted it in this way, not necessarily what you requested, but something that's going to be better for you potentially, then you get the win of enhancing your integration for your wide scope of customers, but also meeting their need. So again, just treating it like another product, I think, is really the key there.
Now, one dimension of this question I don't think we've covered yet, which is them being robust, right? Concern over robustness and stuff. And I've certainly seen that interest coming from customers as well. They're investing an awful lot in your platform and your product and your service. And, then, to do some of the things they need to do, they got to go off and, install some integration from some little company they may not have heard of. How are they going to, they come to us and say, I trust you guys. I did, our full due diligence around Procore, but I don't know this other third party, right? And, how do I know they're not 2 guys in a basement somewhere? And then I can put my data, leverage my data through them, and it'll be there. So I think, as always is the case with partners, and customers, it's really around trust, right? So doing everything you can to make sure that you have high quality, well-tested, well-validated integrations. And I think it was Justin that said, no matter who's the integration from, right, they're going to call you when something goes wrong, right? Making sure you have thought through that whole use case. Customer support use case is really critical too, because the word gets out quick. If a vendor is not, if certain software is not working well, it hits your social media, it hits the community networks, it hits everywhere our customers are looking. And the SaaS company needs to step up and make sure that they're there to solve that problem and that they don't exist in the first place.
Yeah, 100% agree with what everyone's saying. And I think that a theme that I'm noticing here is that like these integrations are really like features of a product essentially, and that they need to be treated as such and like iterated over time. It's the saddest thing when you see, an app review in an app store and it's got a bunch of 1 stars and you can tell that nothing's been updated for 3 years. And it could be quick changes.
Yeah, and even more important because, not only are you updating your product, right, but your partners are updating their products.
Yep.
And so you have to, it's even more important for those integrations to stay current with, everything that it's connecting. So.
Yeah, and well, I love what you said too about like, treating it like a regular customer interview. We see oftentimes too that some of those needs can actually be addressed by your own system. Like maybe it's not even an integration related thing. It's just, customer education and onboarding. Okay, one more pre-queued up question, and then we'll get to the one from the audience because it's along the same lines. When it comes to designing integrations between 2 systems, you have to really understand the audience's pain points from another system. So how do you guys find is the best way to gather that information? And I think the kind of core of this question is, how do you figure out the use cases for an integration when another system is potentially brand new to your team and maybe the segment of that type of product is completely new to your team?
Yeah. Sorry, you want to go off, Larry?
No, go ahead, Andy.
I was just going to say, we work with lots of clients on this problem in particular, and we've kind of developed a methodology. And so first of all, the notion of getting close to your customer is at the core of the answer to this question. Get close to your customers know. But when you say customer, then you got to think about what does that really mean? Because there are different roles within the customer. There are users, there are decision makers, there are implementers, and so you need to make sure you talk to all the different persona involved in that. But now you also have partners involved as well. And so you probably want to talk to the partners. And by the way, it might be good to also understand what the competition is doing to make sure that you understand what. So we have this notion of like 360-degree ecosystem research, which is basically, you need to make sure that you're checking all the boxes across all those different persona, across all those different companies that are influencing the decisions to purchase products. And the better job you do of covering that landscape in your research, the better you're going to be able to design these integrations, right?
One of the fun tools to add on to that, Andy, is Duda hosts a robust community. It's kind of like a forum where a lot of our agency partners can share tips, strategies, ask questions, and I get in there and I have the Duda app guy handle, and I'm in there, asking questions and learning and trying to gather information, because I could easily find pain points in that forum in a fast and effective manner. Like I also will join client calls and ask questions about, how is our ecosystem? What are you looking for? But I find that immersing myself in that community and just being transparent, being open, putting down those barriers of business relationship and just, listening to our customers where they're most vocal and vulnerable. I find a lot of ideas of, okay, we're missing some breadth in this certain category and we need to cover that. Or this integration isn't working well and I need to add some depth there and I need to fix these aspects. Like we find that our community is oftentimes our best asset besides external resources like G2 and Capterra, obviously, but that is an immensely valuable resource to get in there fast and find some of those data points.
Yeah, you're here.
Yeah, we also do user experience research, especially if we're trying to launch something new, and that often extracts some really interesting feedback. Obviously, really understanding your customer's problem is really key, not just what they're trying to do with your software, but what problem are they trying to solve with the whole tech stack they have. And when if you're talking to a customer, and obviously Andrew's right, the right personas at that customer, they might think that, oh, this is vendor X asking me about, their software, but you got to kind of help them understand, no, you want to understand their whole problem, right? Because they might just give you answers about things that they irritate them about using your software, for instance, and that doesn't help you paint the whole picture.
Yeah, and I would say when you're talking to customers, of course you want to talk about pains and needs and things like that, but ultimately what you want to center the conversation around is outcomes. What are the business outcomes that they're trying to accomplish? And the reason I say that is because that's going to give you the best ability to understand what does the whole solution look like that's going to enable the outcome. Like I'm just not trying to get them to fill out, a field in a form. I'm trying to get them to, close a deal with a customer or whatever it is, right? What are all the different components in that bigger picture, right? Sorry, were you going to say something, Larry?
No, I was just adding on, like, what problem are they trying to solve overall?
Yeah, exactly. And what outcomes are delivered by solving those problems. Exactly.
And that's a solutions mindset rather than just, hey, let's integrate this. That is a focused solutions mindset, going back to your original point there, Andy.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, Will, anything to add?
Just to add my piece. Going back to the 360 feedback, I think that's amazing. That's exactly what needs to happen because you got to get that full picture. But I think the other piece to add on is to mobilize this kind of methodology. It's not just the product team or it's not just the ecosystem team. It's got to be your actual sales team, your customer engagement team. They've got to have that mindset as well of end solution, end outcome. How do we get there? And making sure that team is infusing the integrations conversation in, because you're not going to be able to be there in every conversation, but you want to arm them with the right questions to ask, the right data to gather so that they can take it back to the team. We can consolidate that kind of information and use it to make informed decisions or have follow-up conversations.
So critical. I mean, and that's something that, we're really focusing our practice on these days, is really getting companies to understand how they need to transform the whole company to be ecosystem centered. So it gets back to one of my original points is, yeah, I mean, of course, the product may be the starting point, right? But getting all of those organizations aligned with an ecosystem mindset is what you need in order to enable what you're talking about, Will, and that's super critical. And having, you know, visibility and you know, air cover at the C level to make that happen.
I want to add, just to keep this going, because I love this topic, is like we've seen change recently, especially within our organization, where, you know, our teams, our customer success and account management teams would be having conversations with end clients, and, you know, they would be having conversations of, okay, this app or this integration. And we completely flipped the script and said, let's talk about the solution. And again, and we're not even really talking about the app or the integration or whatnot. We're saying, hey, what if this solution could provide you that, what you're looking to solve? And the client is able to then see the value in that. And then we say, okay, it's this product, this feature we have, or it's this integration. To them, it's hey, it's Duda. It's, you're offering us this platform to solve our business needs. And by changing that thought, that talk point, we've seen a dramatic increase in just the engagement level of when we're talking about these integrations, because sometimes integrations can be scary. Oh, it's this, going back to what Larry said, it's this two guys in a garage or in a basement. But when you talk about the solution and they buy into it, it completely changed the tone of the conversation.
Yeah, and I think taking ownership of the solution at that level puts you in a much, much stronger position in terms of building relationships with the customers and stickiness and being trusted advisors and all the rest. So,
this is a good one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and I love this conversation. And I also, this is part of why I love doing integration work, and I've been doing it for so long, because I feel like it's this really cool combination of like customer support, engineering, and product. You know, it shouldn't be totally customer dictated in terms of the functionality and stuff, but I think it's really cool to see how folks use different technology. And to your point, Justin, how you can help assist with that, even if it's not something that is within sort of your four walls or is outside of the purview of your own product.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We just have a couple minutes left, but I want to get to the question from one of the attendees. So when analyzing the relationship between integration, adoption, and retention and churn, how many integrations would you suggest looking at per user? Would 3 be sufficient for this analysis?
I'll take that one first. I think this one really depends on the data, right? So what we did and what we do at Procore is we actually track the retention at 1 integration, well, 0 integrations, 1 integration, 2, 3, 4, 5. I won't say where it stops, but there's a certain place where it just flattens out, and I kind of know where that sweet spot is. And retention is really high if I get to there. And then, you know, so, and that changes a little bit based on market, you know, whether it's emerging or enterprise, you know, and it changes a little bit, not much, just on region though. So I think being sensitive to that, knowing where your customers are, what they're using, how many they tend to need in order to really stay and find full value out of your platform is that's sort of what you need to find. And it's not that hard to find it. You just put the knobs and switches and the metrics on the things, and you start measuring and running, and then you'll see where that sweet spot is for you. And then you dig into, why is it there? Why is it not fewer? Why should it be more? What are the integrations that are helping me get there? And that'll help you know which ones are most important for which markets.
Yeah, similar. I think it's very dependent on, you know, market that you're in, the product and platform that you offer. You know, if I'm going to be selfish and look at just the web design platform, for instance, is like, you know, Shopify has an average of 6 integrations for a lot of their stores. If you look at holistically, they're looking at 6, whereas a lot of the other platforms are far fewer, and we even see far fewer. But we do see, as soon as that first integration is completed, our retention rates increase, you know, drastically. And similarly, Larry, we do see that flattening. Yeah. So I think it's just finding that specific spot, but also looking at all of them. You know, if I see an increase at 1, but I see a bigger increase at 2, I'm still going to question, even if I know, hey, 2 might be my sweet spot. Well, what's the benefit of having 1, and how can I increase the retention? Maybe it's, how do I message it? How do I provide better, you know, materials on my website to get the retention higher on that single integration to bring it more in parity with the second? So I think there's a lot of analysis outside of just how many integrations and what's the retention rate? What is we overlap a lot of times Google Analytics and a lot of usage reports and engagement reports on the integrations page. So, maybe I need to do better work in showcasing and categorizing to increase those retention rates as well.
Yeah, one other thing we're thinking about looking at is time to first integration. Right, I haven't looked at that yet, but I suspect that that's probably pretty critical too. So your onboarding, your sales engineering and onboarding customer support teams that kind of, once a sale is made, get some up and running, the faster they can help them get integrations in use, the better, right? Because then you climb that ladder of the sweet spot of integrations more quickly.
Well, we are just at time. Anyone have any final tips, tricks, thoughts before we wrap here?
Hedgehog concept. I think a lot of us are all fans of Jim Collins and Good to Great. And Andy and Larry were the first to really kind of, encompass this in this panel was, do what you're best at. Don't try to do everything. Do what you're best at, hone in on that. All the great companies do that. And then bring in partners to integrate with that offer a viable solution and lean on them, make it a true partnership.
Yeah, and outside of everything that Justin just said, but outside of the product organization, as a business, you need to think about the bigger picture, the bigger solution, and how you're fitting into the ecosystem to enable that bigger solution and take ownership at that level, not necessarily in terms of building everything yourself, but in terms of messaging how you fit into that bigger solution to the customer. And like I said, that just puts you in such a stronger position in terms of your relationship with the customers.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with the go-to ecosystem work that Digital Bridge Partners is doing, definitely I would say check it out. There's a huge amount of really good frameworks and best practices and information rolled up in that. I was just looking at a post that Alan had done on LinkedIn right before this about aligning programs and aligning network businesses to, and it's all spot on, really helpful in this space.
Sounds much better coming from you, Larry, than it would have from me. So thank you for that.
Good info.
And Will, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just keep it simple. Thinking of integrations in your ecosystem as a product, treating it with that same level of involvement and respect, investing in ecosystem or partnership, whatever you call that aspect of your business, and really building that out early on. And then also just focusing on solutioning for customers, because at the end of the day, that's what you're trying to solve as a business. And you do that in most cases through the power of your network, your ecosystem, and integrations.
Right. Well, we will leave it there. Thanks for everyone that stuck around a little extra time. This is recorded. We will, I believe, also have a blog post that we'll share with everybody. If you're not a member of the SaaS Ecosystem Alliance, please join to have access to our Slack channel where we can have these kinds of nerdy, fun conversations all the time. It's SaaSEcosystemAlliance.com. And thanks so much to our panelists for attending today and sharing your knowledge. I'm sure we could all talk about this forever. Maybe I'll see some of you guys at some events over the coming year. And yeah, really appreciate everyone taking the time.